All right. Thank you very much, colleagues. A warm welcome. It's a morning, it's an afternoon, it's an evening, depending on where you're joining us from. It is really lovely to be here with all of you to join this dialogue that we are going to be having today with the UN Special Rapporteur on freedom of peaceful assembly and association. So today we're going to have an interacting conversation just to make sure that all voices are heard. My name is Takaedza Tafire. You can call me Taka in short, and to make it also simple, I'm based in Zimbabwe, and I'm the program coordinator for Freedom of Peaceful Assembly with CIVICUS Global Alliance. And today I'll be co-facilitating this session or this dialogue with my friend Kuhu from One Future Collective based in India. Maybe before I start, I would invite my co-facilitator or co-pilot, Ku, to just also introduce yourself so that you can also hear a voice. Then we kickstart the conversation. Ku, if you can hear me, please come through and just introduce yourself.
Thank you, Taka, for the lovely beginning to the session. Very excited to be here today. My name is Kuku. My pronouns are she, her, and I work with an organization called One Future Collective. I am based out of Mumbai, India, and I'm a part of the Vuka steering committee. So, very, very excited to be a part of this space today. And hopefully, through the next 1.5 hours, we'll get to interact with a lot of you and hear from Gina as well on the lovely conversation that we have in store. Thank you. Thank you, Taka. Over to you.
Thanks very much, Kuhu. It's amazing. So colleagues, before we proceed, I think it is very important for us to outline just few housekeeping issues so that we can have a progressive dialogue. Maybe just to begin, I want to reiterate the importance of us to make it a safe space. So I'll encourage you in all your engagements, try to be constructive and always put your mic on mute if you're not speaking, and just make sure that you're following the process. With regards to translation, we appreciate the diversity on the call today, and please try to locate the icon on your screen, which is written interpretation, and please select the language that you are comfortable with or that you're conversant with. We have English translation, French, and Spanish, so you can select the language. It is also important for us to just mention on this outset the importance of speaking a bit slowly to accommodate our translators so that we can move together, leaving no one behind. I'm going to quickly outline the structure of this dialogue today so that we can all appreciate what is going to happen. So after this, I'm going to quickly hand over to Jessica, who is going to give us the welcome remarks from CIVICUS. Then thereafter, I'm going to introduce and invite the UN Special Rapporteur, Gina Romero, to then give a presentation in 15 minutes. Thereafter, I'm going also to take you through regional updates with colleagues from different regions, our members and partners, and also from the CIVICUS monitor. After that, we're also going to have a quick break, then reconvene and have a question and answer session where we're going to make sure that everyone's voice is heard, and we give you the opportunity to ask important questions, to react, and to interact with the UN Special Rapporteur. Thereafter, we are going to then have a session or a brief reaction from the We Risers, a FOPA grassroots campaign. After that, we're going to then have the closing remarks and then wrap up our dialogue. So it's going to be a very interactive but interesting dialogue. I see the numbers are already encouraging. So colleagues, without wasting much time, allow me to then invite the senior leadership member from CIVICUS, the Chief Officer for Solidarity, Advocacy and Action, Jessica Corridor, to then give us the welcome remarks. Over to you, Jessica.
Thank you, Taka. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you. It is a pleasure and an honor to welcome you all to this important conversation with Gina Romero, the recently appointed UN Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Assembly and Association. As many of you know, Gina has been a close partner and ally of CIVICUS for many years in her previous position as Executive Director of RedLab, one of our CIVICUS Monitor research partners. It is a privilege to have her in this critical role as Special Rapporteur at such a pivotal time for civil society. We are very excited about the opportunity to collaborate closely and contribute to her mandate, working together to uphold and expand the fundamental freedoms of assembly and association. Her mandate couldn't be more urgent or necessary. It is not a secret to anyone that we are witnessing an alarming trend of shrinking civic space worldwide. Shockingly, only 2% of the global population now live in countries where civic space is truly open. One of the most affected rights in this context is the right to freedom of peaceful assembly. Over the past 5 years, we have seen protests erupt across the globe in response to increasingly harsh socioeconomic conditions, rising costs of living, growing inequalities, climate change crisis, and attacks on democracy. For many, peaceful protest remains the only viable means to voice their grievances and demand change. And yet, this right is increasingly under threat. The detention of protesters has consistently ranked as a top violation of civic space. This troubling trend spans countries with varying degrees of civic freedom, from open to closed societies. And shockingly, at least 30% of such incidents occur in countries with open to narrowed civic space, highlighting that even nations with strong democratic institutions can and do target protesters. These detentions serve to prevent and disrupt protests, punishing individuals for exercising their rights and creating a chilling effect that discourages peaceful assembly through fear. All of this is only a brief reminder of the challenges that we currently face and highlights the importance of having a dedicated advocate and leader like Gina Romero in the position she now holds as UN Special Rapporteur. Despite these difficulties, there is still hope. People power is a force that can never be underestimated. We have seen time and again how collective action can lead to meaningful transformations, reinforcing our belief in the power of people to organize, campaign, and advocate for change. Protests provide vital platforms for individuals to come together, voice their opinions, demonstrate dissent, and raise their voices against injustices. Peaceful assemblies can help us overcome even the most daunting challenges. Those driving change and holding people power are present here today, and I want to extend our heartfelt thanks to them, the members and partners of the CIVICUS Alliance and the Vuka Coalition. Your unwavering support and collaboration make our work possible and give us hope. Thank you all for being here today and for your continued commitment to defending and expanding civic space. And we look forward to a productive and inspiring conversation.
Thank you very much, Jessica, for those warm welcome remarks. Everyone, I think you feel welcomed now, and it is very important to remind you that this dialogue is being hosted by CIVICUS and the Vuka Coalition, and we're going to make sure that it is as engaging as possible. Before we proceed, allow me to encourage you also to use the chat box if you have questions, if you have reactions, so that we can constantly engage through the chat box before the Q&A. I will take this opportunity to then introduce Gina Romero so that she will then proceed to give her remarks. I think Jessica has mentioned very well that she started or she assumed office in April this year. And I just want to let you know that Gina Romero is a renowned civil society leader and human rights defender from Colombia. She's the current UN Special Rapporteur on freedom of peaceful assembly and association. And she previously led the Democracy and Rule of Law initiatives, serving over 10 years as the executive director of the Latin American and Caribbean Network for Democracy, REDLAD. When I was reading about Gina, what is also exciting to note and to share with you is that she's also an international consultant on governance issues, including anti-corruption, access to information, and youth participation, and a guest professor at the Columbia University and the Externado University. In short, Gina, she's a friend of CIVICUS, she's a friend of Vuka, she's the friend of civil society, and she's the friend of democracy. So ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, allow me to invite Gina to then give us your remarks in 15 minutes. Over to you, Honorable. I don't know if I should call you also Professor, but over to you, Gina.
Gina, only Gina. Hello, can you hear me well?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, thanks to everybody. Thanks to Taka and Kuhu and Jessica for the introductions and to CIVICUS for this invitation. I am seeing very familiar faces and names connected, and that makes me very happy. So thanks to all of you for being here. As it was mentioned before, and you know, I have been a human rights defender for years, and most of my professional life have been in civil society. So I directed the Latin American and Caribbean Network for Democracy for nearly 10 years, which, as it was mentioned, is one of the Latin American research partners at CIVICUS Monitor. And I and some of the fantastic people that worked at REDLAD were very close in the conception and development of the monitor, but also in many other initiatives, including AGNA, the CIVICUS Youth Initiative, the Civil Society Weeks, among others. So I feel at home when I'm in CIVICUS and with CIVICUS members. And this is why I feel very happy for being here today in my new capacity and as UN Special Rapporteur for Freedom of Assembly and Association. I didn't know I could speak Spanish. If I knew, I would have perhaps prepare myself for doing so because I feel more easy. But then I'm just going to do the whole thing in English. And I hope I don't speak too fast. If I do, please just give me a sign or something because I have that horrible tendency. So sorry in advance with the interpreters. So as you know, the special rapporteurs are part of the special procedures that are appointed and respond to the Human Rights Council in collaboration with the High Commissioner of Human Rights. So I am part of a wider system, but I am an independent expert, and this is something important just to take in mind. And then what we do, in case you need to give to know the basic information, is that the special rapporteurs collect information on trends and possible human rights violations regarding the rights of the country or the issue that is in their mandate. And then the collection of this information is done by sending communication to governments, meeting different stakeholders, doing visits, and so on. Also, we process information to present it in form of reports or comments of legislations or others. And then we voice up when we need to set a clear a message on human rights violations, on violations of standards, and so on. And then just I am taking an office that had fantastic people before me. So I really honor the work, especially of Maina Kai and Clément Boulet, who were my predecessors in the position. And then I see that the mandate has proved its value with their work and reports, but also have shed lights in the specifics for the guarantee of freedom of peaceful assembly and association, and help to strengthen the standards with the different reports that at some point become soft law in the international human rights law, and the relations built with the states and other actors, including civil society and others. This is something that I'm going to carry if I am allowed to by the different actors. And then this is why, for me, I'm going to walk you through some of the ideas that I have to kind of going deeper or carry on the work that the mandate has had in the past, but also some of the ideas of topics and problematics and actions that I really would like to do as a new, although nothing is new, but as a new way for me to put my sign on what it is, the mandate. So I'm going to build in to some of the work that both Mina and Clement did, especially in updating some of the Mina's reports that are like more far away in time, doing a follow-up on the specific country visits done in the past by both of them, and establishing a path to advance in the promotion and implementation of wonderful tools that were created by both of them. Especially the model protocol and toolkit for law enforcers and the guarantee of human rights in the context of protest, which was presented to the Human Rights Council in the last March. And it's actually something that comes into my lab with a very relevance, which is very relevant for the advance of the standards of freedom of peaceful assembly. So as you know, the protocol and its toolkits are the product of a collective work developed by my predecessor in collaboration with the UNOGC and the Office of the High Commission of Human Rights. And then this is something that I really want to mention because I'm going to devote it a lot of time, especially next year for this. And then is that last week it was approved at the Human Rights Council, a resolution that requests me as a special rapporteur to advance in a global consultation on the role of different stakeholders in promoting the application of the toolkit, which what it wants is just to create more standards for the law enforcers regarding peaceful protest. And also it requests the Office of the High Commissioner to create what I call pilots of the toolkit application at the national level, which is something that is going to be taking a lot of my time next year, as I told you. And then this is some very brief on what comes from the past. There is a lot of things to say, but then I have little time, and then I want mainly to hear from you. So what I want to tell you is which are some of the priorities, topics, or issues that I want to tackle, at least in the first 3 years of the mandate. My tenure started on May the 1st, so I've been there only a month and a half, 2 months and a half, and I've been meeting in this time with different stakeholders, with a lot of civil society groups, with some governments also, and others, to listen about their perspective of the mandate, the needs that they see from the field, and so on. And taking into consideration these consultations, my personal interest, but also Clement's report, which outlines the main gains and challenges from freedom of peaceful assembly and association in their tenure. I want to share with you some of the initial topics that I'm prioritizing. The first one, as you may know, I will be presenting at the General Assembly in October, a report about hostile narratives that are affecting the exercise of freedom of assembly and of association and its impacts in different groups. This is a topic that has been highlighted by Clement in his report, but many civil society organizations in their meetings and in their own reports. And also it's in my interest because I've been a victim of that, hostile narratives and hostile hostility from civil society when I was in civil society. So I want to see the relation between stigmatization, criminalization, and stigmatization and violence against activists, human rights defenders, unionists, and protesters. So this is mainly the focus on the report. If you still, I already have a first draft, but I'm still pending some of the activities in how to do counter narratives. So if you have any information on that, successful or not successful, please send it to me because I'll make sure to include them somehow in the report. This is for this year's report. For next year reports, I will be mostly working in 2 topics. One, the analysis of the lessons learned and good practices from the super electoral year, which is this, regarding the exercise of freedom of assembly and of association. This just taking into account a communication that different special rapporteurs produced in January or February this year. And then I want to see what happened in the whole year in different regions with different types of elections, and what happened with the guarantee of the rights and the specifics of the rights on that. So that is the first one. And the second one, I want to update one of Mina's report, especially the one that he presented in 2014, that was focused on the UN, the participation of civil society at the UN. But I want to widen its scope and just to try to do an analysis on the participation of civil society and other actors in intergovernmental organizations, including UN, including the regional ones, including the human rights bodies, and so on. And then I want to include also UN-related events like COPs and others. So this is something that I will be working heavily also next year to present a report at the General Assembly. So that is pretty much which is the agenda for next year regarding to reports. Two other topics I am interested in work are the exercise of people of freedom of peaceful assembly, and especially an association for people on the run, migrants, peoples on exile, and even a connection with transnational repression. This is something I want to do. Also, I want to go deeper in the use of surveillance tools and less lethal weapons in the management of peaceful protest and peaceful assemblies. And then just all the issues related to the application of the protocol, and which are the hardest thing to work on regarding accountability and justice after the extreme use of force for law enforcers in the context of peaceful protest. And this is also like some other topics that I would like to be working on, and then perhaps I will be presenting a report in my third year of tenure. And also I'm interested, and I am actually doing a follow-up on certain topics of situations, perhaps not to present reports, but also to voice up, to send letters and even recommendations to different actors. As you might imagine, the situation related to the solidarity movement around Gaza, were including the peaceful protest led by students around the world, have kept me very busy. I met already with around 70 actors from the US, UK, France, Germany, Netherlands, including student, faculty members, and 11 law enforcers. I received also information from Canada and Australia. So I'm processing all the information, and I want to create a set of recommendations to the universities before the next semester start, but also an analysis of what is it that is creating, that is like, just creating that this situation that universities are not a safe space for the exercise of freedom of assembly, and especially on this topic. And then also one thing that is a high priority for me, it's the study of the adoption of restrictive laws for NGOs, which is other trends that have been identified in the past. I've been creating and promoting the official send of letters to different governments and Congress related to this. So I already sent one to Peru, one to Rwanda, and as we speak, I'm preparing other two. And then this is something I will be working on, especially on the move of what is happening, because at the end, the context, the legal context in which civil society is working is shrinking, and that is one of the reasons of the shrinking of civic space in the world. I don't have yet a specific regional or country focus, so I really would like to hear from you about this. My time is nearly over, so I'm not going to go in deep on this, but I am prioritizing all those countries that are adopting restricting NGOs laws, and then also those countries that are either adopting new legislation regarding the right of protest or want to do some police reforms, and then all those countries that in which I could actually work on some issues related to justice and accountability after the use of extreme force and violence in the context of protest. Just to end, I still have 2 minutes. I want to tell you that for me, it's very important to keep the door open with civil society, but with the need of having an open conversation, and for me to receive a clear and update and on-time information of the things that happen in the field. You need to also understand that I am part of a system that it has its limits. and then we all know the limits of the UN system, but also I am independent expert that have also limited capacity. My team is only 2 people at the UN, and then I have the fortune to have another person in the full-time as an external team. But this is only the 4 of us following the whole country, the whole world, with 2 very heavy rights. So that is when I was invited to this conversation, there was a question saying, so how could we actually, what do I need and how can we build a strong relation? And then mostly what I need is trust from you. What I need is also clear information and complete information. I mean, if you need something from me, please send me all the information with context, with even if you need me to do something regarding, let's say, an allegation letter regarding something happens in a place, I need the concrete details, but I also need a consenting form if I need to mention an organization or a person, and also need rapid response from you. I am a very well-versed person of what happened in Latin America because it's the continent in which I live in. I'm in Bogota right now. And then I have been working in Latin America for many years now. So I know the context. And when somebody from Paraguay or from Peru tells me that something happens, I can connect immediately with the history and the past. But that is not the case with other regions. So if somebody calls me from I don't know, Kenya, for example, which is a country I'm studying now, please send me all the information as more detailed as possible, and then just at some point have a conversation with me on which is the process of what is happening. Even the same with MENA, the same with Asia and the other subregions in the world. But then for me, it's very important to keep having this door open and just to have a possibility for us to act together. But then remember 3 things. I have limited capacity, so I need to prioritize sometimes the work, and then I need you to help me to do that prioritization. I also have I am an independent body from the UN, from the governments, and from civil society. So at some point, you're going to be seeing me I just keeping quiet on some things. And this sometimes is because of capacity, but sometimes it's because of any other diplomatic action that perhaps I or other colleagues are doing. So don't get mad at me so easily. I know that you know that I am a partner. So I need just for you also some patience and trust, which is what I believe is the more important for me. I'm over 2 minutes. I'm sorry, Taka.
No, it's fine. Thank you very much, Gina. You know, when you were speaking and you started mentioning all the work that you've already started doing, and I'm like, in 1.5 months, what an amazing partner and collaborator that we have in the space. So it's really encouraging to know like you're already doing a lot of work, and thank you very much for sharing with us, especially to share the roles and responsibilities for your office. I think it's very good for the CIVICUS Alliance to understand and appreciate the work that you do, so that even when they want to engage you in future, they know how to approach their office. I also want to say thank you very much for outlining some of the key priorities for your tenure in office. And I hope the Alliance members and partners have already started picking opportunities of collaboration where they can work with you and make sure that we advance the right to peaceful assembly and association. So colleagues, I think we've heard from Gina. It is also very important for us to also give in the chance to the regional, for regional updates, so that we can also make sure that Gina have an enhanced 360 view of the world. I think I love to when she appreciates that she's human and she got limitations in terms of understanding what is happening in other regions. And probably that's why we're also having this space, and to make sure that we all appreciate what is happening in different regions. So the following people are going to give us regional updates. Some of them are the members from AGNA, some our partners under Monitor, some with Vuka, some with the Global Resource Hub, some with the We Rise campaign. We've tried to engage different actors from different networks that we work with so that they can give us regional updates. So I'll quickly invite Analia Bitoni from ICD, who is representing Latin America, to share with us in brief the overview of the regional things that are very important for us to take note and also for Gina to take note. Over to you, Analia.
Hello, everybody. I'm going to speak in Spanish, so people that need translation, please check that you can do it. Muchas gracias por la invitación, por la oportunidad de estar aquí hoy. Muchas gracias, Gina, por tu presentación y por todo el trabajo que has comenzado a hacer muy fuertemente y que seguramente vas a seguir durante todos estos años. La verdad que es un gusto poder tenerte del otro lado en este espacio que hemos compartido desde este otro tantos años de trabajo. Para ser breve, bueno, en América Latina las condiciones del espacio cívico han seguido deteriorándose durante todos estos años, y específicamente en lo que refiere a la libertad de asociación y la libertad de asamblea pacífica, me gustaría mencionar algunos temas. En lo que se refiere a la libertad de asociación, me gustaría mencionar dos temas, bueno, uno es las personas defensoras de derechos humanos, la situación de persecución, de amenaza, de ataque permanente y de asesinato en la región. América Latina es la región más mortífera para las personas defensoras de derechos humanos, y por eso es tan importante tener mecanismos de vigilancia y de protección, ¿no? Específicamente en la región de América Latina, las personas defensoras del ambiente, las personas defensoras de la tierra, defensoras de los derechos de los indígenas, son quienes más vulnerados están en este momento. Cada año cientos de personas son asesinadas en países como Colombia, Brasil, Perú, Ecuador, por mencionar algunos, ¿no? Solo en Colombia, en el año 2023, fueron asesinadas 186 líderes y líderes sociales e indígenas. Entonces, es una situación realmente de suma gravedad, y es algo que estamos desde el Monitor permanentemente tratando de demostrar y generar visibilidad de esto. Hay otro tema que mencionó Gina, que es más reciente, pero que es una avanzada muy fuerte en la región, que son las leyes que se están proponiendo y aprobando en los países, leyes restrictivas de la libertad de asociación de diversas maneras. En muchos países se les llaman leyes anti-ONGs, porque generan limitantes muy importantes, pueden generar limitantes muy importantes al trabajo de las organizaciones. En Venezuela, por ejemplo, un proyecto de ley de fiscalización, regulación, actuación y financiamiento. En mayo de este año se aprobaron 9 artículos, y bueno, la situación de Venezuela se ha visto deteriorada, que en el Monitor ha pasado a ser un país de la categoría cerrada. Pero también tenemos el caso de Perú, donde una ley que faculta a la Agencia Peruana de Cooperación Internacional a controlar, a supervisar y a fiscalizar la utilización de recursos por parte de las organizaciones de desarrollo, de las ONGs de desarrollo, y además agrega una potestad de registrar a las organizaciones que trabajan en activismo político. Eso es una grave amenaza para muchas organizaciones que reciben fondos del exterior y que trabajan en estos temas. En Paraguay también es como contagioso en la región. En Paraguay, en junio, el Senado aprobó un proyecto que establece también el control de la transparencia y la rendición de cuentas de las organizaciones sin fines de lucro. La sociedad civil está haciendo un trabajo de alerta y fuertemente saliendo a hablar, porque bueno, esto también limitaría el acceso a los fondos por parte de las organizaciones y a la utilización de esos fondos. En El Salvador, un proyecto de ley sobre agentes extranjeros, ¿no? Que podría silenciar a las organizaciones, y además impone que un 40% sobre ciertos fondos que reciben las organizaciones deban pagarlo como un impuesto a la financiación extranjera. Y todos estos procesos, además de que son propuestas legislativas, van acompañados de un discurso estigmatizante de las organizaciones. Críticas, el discurso estigmatizante contra las ONGs y acusándolos de ser terroristas, ¿no? O hacer un mal uso de estos fondos, o no estar trabajando por fines democráticos. En cuanto a la Asamblea Pacífica, también hay unos tristes ejemplos para mencionar. Voy a mencionar solo 2 casos, porque también tengo poco tiempo y no me quiero extender. Hay muchos compañeros acá que van a también presentar. Pero hay 2 casos muy tristes. En ese sentido, el caso de Haití, es donde ha habido además de estar inmerso Haití en una situación que han llamado como un cataclismo social por la cantidad de muertes y el problema que enfrenta Haití en términos políticos, ha habido una represión brutal de las fuerzas de seguridad en las últimas marchas antigubernamentales, donde fueron asesinadas 4 personas, 15 personas heridas, 8 de ellos periodistas. En Haití no es nueva esta situación, pero sí hay un recrudecimiento en una situación que realmente alarma a todos. Y más recientemente, aunque con menor intensidad, pero que también estamos poniendo la atención, es la situación de nuestro país. Yo soy de Uruguay, nuestros vecinos de Argentina, donde con el nuevo gobierno se han instalado un protocolo que limita la protesta, y hay un despliegue muy fuerte de operativos policiales, ¿no? Que se consideran desmedidos, que un poco genera un poco de autocensura al momento de poder movilizarse. Además de un discurso que se busca asociar a las organizaciones con la violencia, con la desestabilización, hasta se llegó a decir que las marchas, había como un intento de golpe de Estado. Las últimas, entre enero y junio de este año, 80 personas fueron detenidas arbitrariamente, 605 fueron heridas, 665, 47 trabajadores de la prensa fueron heridos. Entonces se pasó muy rápidamente. Están sintiendo, las organizaciones con las que hemos tenido oportunidad de conversar, están sintiendo como un cambio muy rápido a la situación que se venía viviendo, y hay que encender también aquí un poco las luces y prestar atención en caso que sea necesario también algún tipo de intervención. Y desde el Monitor estamos trabajando también con las organizaciones de Argentina para ver de qué manera se las puede apoyar. Yo dejaría por acá, porque creo que ya estoy en mi tiempo también. Muchas gracias, y bueno, quiero escuchar también lo que dicen los compañeros de las demás regiones.
Thank you very much, Analia, for that comprehensive update. We understand that we have limited time, but we appreciate that brief but very precise update. I just want to give an instruction with regards to interpretation. If you are struggling with interpretation or you don't know how to access interpretation, if you look on your icon board just below your screen, you will see a globe icon. Click that globe icon and you have access to interpretation. You can choose the language that you are comfortable with, Spanish, English, or French. Colleagues, to move on, allow me to invite Hanung from Forum Asia to then give us an update on Asia. Hanung, over to you.
Thank you very much, Taka. Hi, Gina and colleagues. My name is Hanung. I'm East Asia ASEAN Program Manager of Forum Asia, currently based in Jakarta. Forum Asia is part of the steering committee of Vuka Alliance and also part of the Global Resource Hub of CIVICUS, so we are quite familiar with CIVICUS as well. We're a network of 85 organizations across 23 countries in Asia, and I'm here to just give a highlight on the alarming trends that we have observed regarding the right to peaceful assembly and association in Asia, based on our repressive law monitoring initiatives conducted together with our members and partners on the ground and also through media monitorings. First, we have seen a growing trend of hostile narratives and stigmatization targeting human rights defenders and human rights organizations, undermining their right to freedom of association and peaceful assembly as well. Just to give an example, in the Philippines, where the HRDs are red tagged and criminalized under various restrictive law, including the Anti-Terrorism Act of 2020, and portrayed as terrorists. And this is also compounded by the Terrorism Financing Prevention and Suppression Act, which is used against them, enabling the government to freeze assets of both organizations and individuals. And Indonesia, specifically the threats against human rights organizations, speaking about Papua issues, have also amplified as surveillance are being deployed by the military and the government, and different groups and individuals have also been labeled as terrorists and as person of inciting separatisms because of their human rights works. And in East Asia regions, the case of Hong Kong's, where the amplifications of national security law and the recently adopted Article 23 have significantly affecting the civic space in the region, depicting pro-democracy act movement as hostile external influences, driving lots of organizations and HRDs to operate in exiles. I also would like to highlight prominent cases from Jammu Kashmir, two HRDs from Jammu Kashmir coalitions of civil society, Kuram Parvez and Irfan Miraj. Kuram has been in pretrial detention for 2 years on politically motivated charges under the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. And same goes to Irfan as well. And these two cases is emblematic cases of India and representing a systematic criminalization of civil society and human rights defenders in Indian administered Kashmir. And the second trend I would like to highlight as well on the excessive use of power, the continuous use of excessive power by the law enforcement apparatus. We have observed this happen in various parts of Asia. Recently, there has been intense repressions of protesting students in Bangladesh who are calling for reform of the quota system. Students have been met with excessive force, and the protests are nationwide. According to the news reports we received, police fired tear gas and charged with batons during violent clashes between the protesters, and protests, at least 100 people wounded, and protests are expected to continue. So we urge your attention to this matter as well. And in Pakistan, also recently, army personnel attacked protesters demonstrating against the forced disappearance of their family members, in which they also met with tear gases while protesting peacefully. I would like to also highlight the brutality of the military junta after the attempted coup in Myanmar since 2021, and the adoptions of the new NGO law and stringent measures by military junta against civil society operating in Myanmar. And Myanmar also gave the case where internet shutdown, digital surveillance have also been deployed by the military junta against pro-democracy youth movement and activists as well. And last but not least, in the context of elections, 8 countries in Asia have election these years, and we have documented different amount or different incidents where the violation of freedom of peaceful assembly happened leading to the elections in order to steering the political voices as well. So to end, some of the recommendations that we would like to see happen in Asia, including the abolishment of repressive laws. There's also the homeworks of adopting comprehensive anti-discrimination laws and policies, strengthen legal framework, and also seeing collaborations between national, regional human rights institution, and also with the new UN Special Rapporteurs on the freedom of association and peaceful assembly as well. I hope I can give justice on the updates on such a diverse regions like Asia. But I believe that this will be the continuations of our engagements for the next time as well. And I believe other attendees can also give further context in their specific countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hanung, for that comprehensive update. And we applaud you for doing justice. It might not suffice because of time, but you did excellently well. Colleagues, we have our interpreters who also want to take a brief break, and would kindly request you to just hang on and have a brief break. Just grab a glass of water, you can stretch, and we quickly reconvene in the next 3 minutes. Just 3 minutes to drink water, to stretch, and we'll be back. In 30 seconds, we resume. So colleagues, I will kindly request you to come back and give us your attention. So I would continue to encourage you to use the chat box if you have any questions, quick reactions. Our UN Special Rapporteur is already accessing some of the comments, the chats, and also with our colleagues who have just given us the regional updates. So we'll continue with the regional updates. We've got only 3 remaining. Then thereafter, we'll then proceed to an interactive session. So allow me to invite Joseph Bikanda from Defend Defenders or African Defenders to give us a brief update on Africa. Joseph, if you can hear me, please proceed.
Thank you, Taka. Let me ensure that I have my watch close to me. Greetings to all of you. And I would like to second you, by the way, to tell Gina, it's only 75 days, but it's like you have been with us for quite some time. So it's an excellent start already to us. And thank you so much. The update on the continent, I think I just want to give you the context in Kenya, and it will paint actually the picture of the continent. First of all, you know what's happening in Kenya because it's a protest that was led by youth that started online because there were a bill, a financial bill that was imposing additional tax on individuals, on citizens. So the people went and said, we have been paying tax, we have not seen service delivery. And they went to the street online, started mobilizing, and came with a huge response. But to my understanding, it's important to mention here 3 key things that happened. The number of killed people demonstrate the violence actually that have been used by the police. At some point, the president tried to invite actually the military to join and repress the people, the police violence and police brutality. And one thing that comes in our mind is the element Gina mentioned about accountability. To us, it's not sufficient. 45 people killed, and we don't have answer. Although we are going to file, there is no specific answer. And on the continent, wherever we go, issues related to police brutality and accountability while exercising our right to peaceful protest is something very key. The second thing that comes up, we see on the continent, I just want to alert you that next week, there might be a huge demonstration here in Kampala, in Uganda, and we predict also there might be violence to that effect. It's important to note. But also, colleagues mentioned already the context of electoral process. We have seen in Mozambique last year, the plea of violence in Mozambique, and we see it actually coming with the presidential election, but other part of the continent also, where we'll have really specific election. Coming back still to the context of Kenya, I would like to emphasize that, the government used telecommunication companies specifically to track individuals online, hunting them actually to prevent them to go to protest. Most of them are influenced online, kidnapping people, and attacking them, tracking them down specifically. It's an element that you should look into, the use of, telecom companies, but also sophisticated technology to track, individual. The second thing that I would like to mention is the profiling. The profiling and the selective attack against individuals and civil society organizations. Still in the case of Kenya, you saw President Ruto came and said Ford Foundation actually is the one funding. On 26 June, he first said, these are foreigners who came with the money, they funded people to go in the street. And yesterday he came and said, no, I know already the face of that person. Ford Foundation, stop. But today, what we saw is not only Ford Foundation, we see our comrades, our coalition, who is selectively singled out, and with other members. So profiling is something that we should make attention to. But also I would like to still make something important with, and I spoke about this in other forum, but what we see the trend on the continent now, there is a new buildup of economic and strategic partnership that will not regard maybe human rights as a first, issue to look into. And we could see clearly on the continent now, where other development partners come with cash money, to try to manipulate, the governments, but also with not holding anyone accountable, funding diverse sector of businesses, or the system that repress actually individuals. It's something that we need to pay attention to. Now, perhaps some of the recommendations I will make have specific, input to Gina's, plans. First is, I've not heard it, but I'm sure maybe it's in your plan. One thing that we found it relevant as civil society organization is the dialogue that the mandate used to make, the inter-mechanism dialogue. It's important to carry best practice from other, region through the specific mandate holders, to adopt a common strategy. The second tool you may use also to create linkage between your mandate, and it's given to you through the Addis Ababa roadmap, which we call, it's a UN special procedures and the African Commission special mechanism partnership, to create a synergy of action. I'm saying this because when you talk about accountability on the continent, there are already instruments to that effect. And while engaging African states, I think we should focus on their instrument that they have in addition to the instrument that you are going to develop. So, and the last point I see is the artificial intelligence and technology evolving. And I think it's beyond perhaps our control now, but there is a possibility as a mandate to look into it critically. I will conclude. The African Commission specifically actually is conducting a research into it, and I think you could find a way to collaborate, and I see. Lastly, I saw in the, those are questions related to you, Gina, but I see there's a high expectation from us citizens, from activists towards your mandate, and we are here to support you, to provide you full support in guiding you in the right direction. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much, Joseph. And I would like to just encourage participants, colleagues, to hang on and continue to throw in their questions and reactions in the chat box, because after the next speaker, we're then going to have the Q&A, which is going to be led by my colleague, Kuhu. Let us just hear the quick update from Mina, from Sarah, who is from Humena, our partner with We Rise campaign. Over to you, Sarah.
Okay, thank you so much, Taka. Can you please allow me to share my screen? Is it possible?
I'll let my colleagues from IT help you, but please try. I think you're able to do that.
No, I'm not. Okay,
Yeah,
I think now I'm able to do that. Okay, great. So hello everyone, and first of all, I would like, on behalf of Humana for Human Rights and Civic Engagement, to congratulate the new Special Rapporteur on her new role. So I'm Sarah, the Executive Director and founder of Humana for Human Rights and Civic Engagement. We are working in the MENA region. We're based in Brussels because on the restrictions on civic space, but we have teams and we're working in most of the countries of the MENA region. So first of all, if I have to highlight the main challenges and constraints on civic space in the MENA region, I would focus on the repression exercised by government on civil society groups and also on and movement. And most importantly, it's very important to highlight that there is also some kind of repression exercised by conservative groups in MENA and non-state actors, like in Lebanon, for example. We have also the legal constraint and restrictions on NGOs, like in Egypt, Tunisia, Morocco, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and Jordan. We're facing some severe economic constraints, like in Lebanon, Egypt, and Tunisia. The hostile narratives against HRDs, the stigmatization and criminalization of their work, like in Tunisia, Iraq, Bahrain, and Egypt. In Iraq, currently, it's criminalized to use the word homosexuality. It's almost impossible for a women organization and for LGBTQ organization to function. We're also suffering from digital surveillance, like in Jordan and United Arab Emirates. One of our main challenges is the insufficient solidarity and coordination between civil society actors in the region and the insufficient international support for organizations working on freedom of peaceful assembly and responding to the shrinking civic space in the region. I invite you to check our new website, We Protest MENA. We have developed this website with the support of CIVICUS and in the context of We Rise campaign. So if you check We Protest MENA, you're gonna see some analysis of the context in MENA, stories from the ground, contributions from activists that have been victims of the violations to the right of freedom of peaceful assembly. We also worked on MENA Solidarity Lab, which is a lab where we are trying to build solidarity to counter harmful narratives against HRDs in MENA. Now I'm gonna share with you some examples from ground, what is happening inside some of the countries. I'll start with my country, Lebanon. So last September, there was a march called Freedom March. The march was planned from a square, a famous square in Lebanon, to the Ministry of Interior under the title for a complete guarantee of our freedoms and in response to successive violations. Unfortunately, the march was, which was organized by feminist and queer association, media, and human rights institutions, was attacked by some conservative and non-state actors. So the problem in Lebanon, not only the authorities, it's also the conservative groups and the non-state actors. In Egypt, for example, most recently in April 23, Egyptian authorities arrested at least 18 demonstrators, most of whom were feminist activists, just for organizing and participating in a peaceful women protest outside the regional headquarters of UN Women in solidarity with the women of Palestine and Sudan. In Tunisia, amid the new accusation from President Kais Saied against certain civil society organizations of receiving suspicious funds, the authorities arrested 3 human rights activists in May 2024 who work in the field of immigration and defend immigrants. One of them was the Tunisian famous activist Sadia Msbah, a prominent activist and head of Manamati organization that combats racism and defends the right of immigrants. In Saudi Arabia, so Saudi Arabia is very famous for its violation of human rights, especially women's rights. So if I have to mention many women that have been arrested just for exercising their basic human rights of a campaigning or just for protesting, I can mention Lujain Al-Hazloul, I can mention Nassim Al-Sada, Samar Badawi, but there is one like a very like an important case of Isra al-Ghamgham or al-Ghamgham. So in 2018, the public prosecutor demanded the killing of Isra al-Ghamgham on a range of charges, including participation in the demonstration. In February 2019, after a huge international support, the Saudi prosecutors dropped their demands. Although she no longer remains under threat of death, her husband and the other defendants could still be subject to execution by the state. In February 2021, after over 5 years of harsh detention, and at just 32 years old, Isra al-Ghamgham was sentenced to 8 years in prison. So there is we have also the problem of MENA diaspora amid the crisis and the genocide happening in Palestine currently. Many of our fellow activists in Europe and USA are standing in solidarity with the Palestinian people. Unfortunately, there is some attacks on activists protesting in this country, especially in Germany, the Netherlands, and the USA. Our recommendations as a HUMINA, like this recommendation are what we think we, in collaboration with the UN Special Rapporteur, Mrs. Romero, we can do together. First is to advocate for the establishment and enforcement of robust protective measures to ensure the safety and security of women and marginalized groups during peaceful assemblies, because like over 5 years of analyzing the context in MENA, we can say that there is some sort of special violations against women and sexual minorities because of their identities, like harassment from the authorities, harassment from the police, stigmatization. We also think that we need to urge the governments to amend and enhance existing legislations and policies related to the freedom of peaceful assembly, to call for the repeal of restrictive laws that limit the ability of individuals to engage in peaceful assemblies, to promote initiatives aimed at combating racism, homophobia, xenophobia, especially in Europe currently, support campaigns to increase public awareness about the right to freedom of peaceful assembly, to promote programs that aim to improve the legal literacy of protesters in the MENA, ensuring that they are aware of their rights and the protective measures available to them, to foster greater collaboration between civil society actors, to analyze and address specific barriers that organizations working on FOPA and MENA face in accessing funding, to ensure sufficient funding and technical support for social movements, particularly the feminist and queer movement and non-formal organizations exercising their right to freedom of peaceful assembly, and to advocate for long-term commitment from donors and governments to support the right to FOPA, to simplify the processes for organizations to engage in discussions with donors, to support efforts to collect data and monitor violence and smear campaigns against activists in both traditional and digital media, to highlight cases of intimidation and reprisals against human rights defenders in decision-making forums, including UN meetings, and to promote solidarity and cooperation among civil society actors and social movements to respond to the shrinking civic space in MENA. Thank you so much for your attention. And again, I would like to thank CIVICUS for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for that comprehensive, and we are really grateful as CIVICUS and Vuka for you to come through and give this regional update. Let's have one last update for Europe, which is going to be shared by one of our CIVICUS monitor team members, Tara. Tara, if you can hear me, please come through.
Thank you, Taka. I won't waste any time introducing the CIVICUS Monitor because so many nice things have already been said by everyone, including Gina. So happy to see so many familiar faces. So I'll just get into giving as brief a regional update as possible. Jessica, in the beginning, already shared that we are currently in a global civic space crisis. Europe and Central Asia, which is the reason I cover, and Europe in particular, are not exempt from this trend. In fact, our recent analysis of CIVICUS Monitor data from 2019 to 2023 shows Europe is on a worrying trajectory. In 2019, almost 20% of the population of Europe and Central Asia lived in countries with fully open civic space, a figure which has halved to around 10% in 5 years. This backsliding in civic space is mostly due to downgrades in Europe in particular. Out of 13 downgrades, 10 were in Europe, with 4 being EU countries, so Belgium, Germany, Slovenia, and Cyprus, slipping from open to narrow. This narrowing of civic space has been linked to growing restrictions on protest rights and criminalization of civil society activists. The most common violations of civic freedoms documented in 2023 in the region were intimidation, detention of protesters, and disruption of protests, as well as censorship and the passing of restrictive laws. Intimidation was the main violation of civic space in Europe and Central Asia during the reporting period, and it was documented in at least 28 countries. It was most often used against journalists and media, but other groups particularly affected were environmental activists, refugee rights activists, as well as women HRDs. This intimidation, which can encompass a lot of things, often took on the forms of attacks on property and premises, such as vandalized cars and offices and threatening messages and so on. In terms of protests, the detention of protesters was the second most common violation in Europe and Central Asia, documented in at least 22 countries, while protests were disrupted in no fewer than 18 countries. Environmental and climate protests, again, and protests against war and conflict were more likely to encounter restrictions. Now, to a point that's already been mentioned, another key violation that we identified and another concerning trend was restrictive laws. As we've already heard mentioned, global conflict and political instability in Europe and Central Asia have led to a proliferation of foreign agent and foreign influence laws, which Analia, for example, also mentioned as the parallel with Venezuela, Peru, existing laws in Nicaragua. These laws ostensibly exist to protect national sovereignty, but often have far-reaching implications for civil society activity, as groups designated as foreign agents are publicly stigmatized and subjected to bureaucratic harassment. These laws are quickly spreading in the region. In just recent months, Kyrgyzstan and Georgia have adopted such laws. France and Slovakia have moved forward with foreign agent legislation, and Bosnia and Herzegovina, to be specific, the Republika Srpska entity, moved forward with their law, then withdrew it, but with the possibility of it having it brought to Parliament again. Now, as we all know, not all activism is equally suppressed. Not all topics provoke an equally harsh response from authorities. For example, somebody in the Q&A portion brought up the Netherlands. In March last year, journalists in the Netherlands found that the police were systematically collecting the personal data of protesters, even those who'd never been charged with any crime, and that the groups most targeted were environmental, anti-fascist, and anti-racist protesters. And that building on that, a particularly worrying trend in the EU over the past couple of years has been the increasing government crackdown on the climate movement, with environmental activists arrested, prosecuted, and surveilled in several countries for nonviolent protest actions. The charges leveled against them have increased in severity. So the charges have been shifted from crimes against property.
Sorry to interrupt. As you wrap up, try to speak a bit slowly.
Okay.
Thank you.
Will do. So, instead of being charged with crimes against property, such as vandalism, these activists are now being charged with crimes against the state, such as sedition, terrorism, as well as organized crime, which allows for expanded surveillance measures and erodes due process. Two more points I'd like to bring up before wrapping up. Another is the criminalization of solidarity actions. So CSOs and activists who provide aid to migrants and refugees have been targeted with criminal prosecution and investigation under anti-money laundering and counterterrorism provisions. We've seen this in Cyprus, Greece, Italy, Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland. Finally, so one of the key trends that has emerged over the past year has been the repression of protests in solidarity with Palestine. According to research done by our partners, European Civic Forum, the research was done in April and does not even include the latest wave of repressions. So 6 months on from the beginning of the conflict, in at least 12 EU member states, authorities took disproportionate measures, including preemptive banning of protests, as well as the fact that the use of excessive force was recorded in at least 7 member states. So in conclusion, this shows us that even established democracies aren't immune to the erosion of civic space we're witnessing globally, and reversing this trend and protecting hard-won fundamental freedoms in an increasingly complex geopolitical context is the primary challenge facing civil society in Europe.
Thank you, Tara. Really appreciate all of the presentations from all of the speakers. I think it paints a picture that is definitely one that we all need to work towards, and it paints a very serious picture for all of us. But very lucky to have the UN Special Rapporteur Gina Romero here with us today, so we are able to discuss some remedies as well. I will invite some questions from the floor for Gina, but as we wait for that, and you can raise your hand specifically for that purpose. Gina, some questions have already been shared, so maybe I can direct a question towards you and we can get started with a discussion on that. A question that was shared with us specifically asks, for migrants, refugees, and stateless communities and peoples, the freedom of association, including the right to join trade unions and associations, has many barriers due to not having documentation or citizenship papers. What are some best practices that you can think of to ensure that this vital right is regardless provided for vulnerable, undocumented communities and irregular migrants as well?
Well, thank you. First to all of you that did the interventions. It's always very interesting to see how the different trends are actually happening in all the regions and subregions with very specific differences, but the trends of the law restriction, the adoption of restricting laws, the use of stigmatization, also the crackdown on protest and the extreme use of violence. All that is happening as a general trend, and this is why this collective thinking is always important. Regarding specifically to the rights of migrants, I can't give you right now a specific answer, because that is a very complex situation, because sometimes, although the international standards establish that everybody, without discrimination and regardless their citizenship, regarding their migration status, are allowed to use and exercise the rights of freedom of assembly and of association. At the end, what is happening in different places, especially in those countries in which migration has been high in the last years, and then they are restricting also the possibilities for migrants to access to rights. There is a huge debate around who is entitled to the right of assembly and the right to association. And that is one of the discussions that I want to give. I want to start looking to actually provide a specific report on that, especially because of what you say, that is so difficult for several people to actually work, to actually participate broadly in their places where they arrived, or in the transit places. It is that I have identified that as a priority. I don't have any recommendation right now, but I just to ensure you that is one of the topics I'm going to be studying, researching, consulting, and then providing reports and recommendations sooner than later to government, civil society, and other actors.
Thank you so much, Gina. And just to reiterate, if you do have any questions, please feel free to raise your hand so we can, invite you to ask the question as well. Just wanted to let everyone know that we have received a large volume of questions, so we may not be able to answer all of them, but looking forward for this engagement. Iria I see your hand is raised, so please do go ahead.
Thank you very much. This is Iria Folgueira from Protection International. My question is related to two of the priorities that the Special Rapporteur highlighted, and I want to also take the moment to thank her for this moment and thank CIVICUS for organizing this and give us the opportunity to discuss with her. My question is related to this trend that brings together both the stigmatizing narrative and the repressive law, which is this foreign agent concept that we see in so many laws, new legislation that restricts NGOs, CSOs access to funding. And my question is, how can we, I look forward seeing the UN Special Rapporteur working on this and bringing together the both concepts, no? Because how could we regain the concept of international solidarity and the funding that, especially in the case of public funding, comes from taxpayers that want to advance human rights work, and it's how can we advance in the legitimacy of funding human rights work as established in the UN Charter. Thank you very much, and we will follow with a lot of interest the work of the Special Rapporteur. Thank you.
Do you want me to address that?
Yes, please, Gina, do go ahead. Thank you.
This topic is it's very interesting because that's what we are seeing, or at least what I am seeing, is a very problematic double standard regarding what is called this foreign influence. And double standards, perhaps it's like a triple standard. Because then from one side, some governments are saying civil society are receiving funds from Western or other actors that can undermine my own capacity, and which is what actually the Paraguayan law is perhaps saying, like in the background. And then also it's undermining the sovereignty of the state. But then at some point when you see those governments also have, those states also have private companies that are either own or receive a lot of funding from abroad, but those companies are not seen as a danger. So here the double standard is that the problem is not that something is coming from abroad. The problem is that something is presenting dissent, and the problem is with the dissent. It's not is with the critics of the government. It's with the promotion of new ideas, of novel ideas, of innovation. It's not about the foreign influence. It's about who is actually against the government. And then this idea of enemy is actually being shaped by this, because then you don't see that multilaterals, multinational fundings from the private sector are receiving the same treatment. And the other double, this is why I'm talking about triple standard, is first these governments are actually promoting the adoption of these foreign agent laws or foreign influence laws. But then at some point, either they receive also international cooperation from other countries in a direct way. So there are several countries that actually receive funding from the EU to actually do several projects, or even from the World Bank, even from the French Bank of Cooperation and some other banks. But then they don't believe that this is also a foreign agent. But then even if, let's say, a country is receiving a loan from the French Development Bank, and then that very same country is actually criticizing and is going against some civil society organizations that are also receiving funding from the French foundations and government, then they don't do the same analysis. So why it is a foreign influence for the civil society and not for themselves. And then the other thing, and this is something that I'm really just curious just to start this conversation. It's about the EU countries that are actually moving the adoption of a directive for the EU regarding foreign agents and foreign influence. Because at some point you have countries also like France that actually are promoting the adoption of this directive internally in the EU. But then what is going to happen if the other countries where they also have like international cooperation and receiving not only the loans, but actually the cooperation of development? What is going to happen if those countries also adopt something similar? So this is a very double standard, and what is behind that is not the foreign agents, it's about who is against the idea of the government. And that is actually against dissent and participation, and not this idea of who is the enemy. And perhaps one of the things that we collectively need to do is just to precisely put in the in the table all these double and triple standards, and trying to do a wider discussion on who is actually the enemy. Is there like an enemy? I mean, is there like civil society, the small grassroots that receive very little funding, or the networks that are receiving funding to support other organizations? Are those the enemies? In those countries in which, for example, there have been several questions in the chat about the Western Balkans on this idea of the Russian influence. Who is actually bringing this Russian influence to the countries? Is actually just the grassroots, the civil society, the social movements? It is so? I don't know. I don't think so. So this is why every adoption on foreign agent laws or foreign agent debates, or even counterterrorism, or even money laundering, needs to be based in concrete risk assessment. It can have like a band, a blanket ban or a blanket stigma to a whole range of factors that are very different internally, that are very actually very different in terms of size, of capacity, and of international connection, and on others. So perhaps this is a very vague response, but for me, and what I am starting to do is actually putting some of these topics on the table and doing the specific comments on the laws that are being adopted and of the EU directive that wants to be adopted also soon.
Gina, and again, opening the questions to the floor. Just in the interest of time, we will be taking a couple of questions at once. So we'll also request folks to restrict their questions to maybe just 1 or 2 sentences as possible. Umaima, please go ahead. I don't think we are able to connect to Umaima at the moment. So maybe we can go ahead with Paula for the next question.
Excuse me, can you hear me?
Yes, we are able to hear you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the organizer, and our congratulations to the Special Rapporteur for choosing her for this position. I'm Umaima Mardi from Sudan. And as you may know that in Sudan we have conflict almost for 15 months now. We have been ruled by a authoritarian dictatorship government for almost 30 years. And we have a revolution where we moved this regime in 2019. But still there a military coup in 2021, where the military come back and take over the power. And now we have this civil war, which has created a hard situation for Sudanese people. So I can say that this military government, before and after the war, they cannot allow for any freedom of assembly or association or freedom of expression. And now in Sudan, we are facing a humanitarian crisis. And some people have been organizing some sessions, workshop to address this issue of humanitarian issue and how they can support people, displaced people due to other countries. Unfortunately, most of these activists working or trying to address this issue of humanitarian issue will be detained by the government. The government cannot allow anyone to speak on anything else especially, except for those who support the war. If you want to support the war, you can be allowed to speak and organize any kind of activity. Otherwise, you are not allowed. We have some of our colleagues now have been detained, and some of them have been disappeared for long times. We don't know what happened to them. So many journalists, media practitioners have been also detained, and no one nowhere have been taken, and no one else happened to them. So in Sudan, the situation is very bad. What I'm trying to say that is in the plan of the Special Rapporteur to have any consultation of the situation of freedom of assembly or freedom of expression in Sudan.
May I kindly request, I'm really sorry to cut you off, kindly request you to close the question since we do have a couple of hands raised as well.
Okay, yeah. My question is that Special Rapporteur, in her plan to conduct any kind of consultation or situation of Sudanese civil society. Most of them are now living in diaspora, in Egypt, Ethiopia, Uganda, and other countries, to speak about the situation of those live inside Sudan. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Umaima. This is well noted. Paola is next. Please do go ahead.
Hola, buenos días, ¿me escuchas?
Sí, Paula, te escuchamos.
Bueno, muchas gracias. Primero, manifestar el agradecimiento a CIVICUS porque nos apoyan y tienen un gran tejido humano para trabajar con las organizaciones sociales de base. Mi pregunta es, CIVICUS es la única persona que está apoyando y trabajando con las organizaciones sociales de base que trabajan en los territorios. ¿Cómo se va a crear un trabajo de unión, un trabajo de alianza que permita llevar ese trabajo a los territorios y a las comunidades donde nos vemos afectados cada día por los derechos humanos, donde se presentan más asesinatos y donde cada día es peligroso el trabajo de defensora de derechos humanos? Entonces queremos saber cómo podemos unirnos y que a través de CIVICUS podamos realizar esa gestión en los territorios, porque es muy importante ser escuchados y es muy importante de que vean verdaderamente a las organizaciones y a la sociedad civil. Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much, Paola. I really appreciate that question as well. And I think we just can take about one more question. Karen, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. And thank you so much, Gina, CIVICUS, and the Vuka Coalition. I'm Karen Vermeer from Oxfam Novib. And I wanted to highlight a couple of issues in the Netherlands with our new government and the right to protest. Our new government, as some of you might know, is center-right with at least one far-right political party. And they have, in their plans for the coming 4 years, they have made it quite clear that they want to limit the right to protest, as they feel that there should be a difference between peaceful and non-peaceful protesters. And they identify, for instance, climate protesters like Extinction Rebellion as activists that are non-peaceful protesters. So they announced the research into the options on how to make the right to protest much more stricter. And they made a clear reference to the UK, for instance, which to us is very concerning. And we also see a very negative narrative on climate and also anti-racism and pro-Palestina activists at the moment with our government. And I was wondering, would this be something of interest to your research, Gina? And if so, how can we best share more details with you? Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Karen. And I think one final question that we have received on chat as well is they would like to ask whether Gina will look into or raise the issue of how nonviolent civil disobedience is being disproportionately penalized to deter protest as well. So lots of questions for you, Gina. I think loads of people have a lot to ask. So we'll request you to kindly come in for this. And also if you could, bring in your closing remarks with your statements as well, that would be really great.
Yeah, indeed, there are like too many questions that I can address now, not only because I don't have time, but also because I don't have all the answers yet. I mean, not yet. I don't know if I ever are going to have them. But the idea is also to create this possibility of putting some other topics on the table. So, for example, regarding the no violence and civic disobedience, I actually think that I have like contempt the idea of actually including this in the different reports, but I don't know if at some point there is a need to actually do a concrete report or analysis on these very specifics, because it's true. When you see how the law enforcers and universities and mayors and other actors have actually addressed the solidarity movement to Palestine around the world, you have seen that even silent protests have been attacked addressed by riot police. I mean, it's just like it's very confusing how the different law enforcers bodies are actually taking decisions on how to address nonviolence and civic disobedience, and this is extremely important for the it's extremely important for very specific protests, such as or peaceful assemblies, such as those that are related with the environment, that most of the time are led by youth, and then that they are creative, and then they actually do use non-violence techniques. But also because there is something very important to take into account, and it is that also when you are when you want to take the street, and then you want to exercise exercise your right of freedom of peaceful assembly, you are not obliged to actually report to the authorities that you are doing this. It's always a good practice to do it, especially for big mobilizations. But then some organizers actually use as a civic disobedience tool not to report their assemblies. And then, therefore, the civic disobedience is also at the center of the exercise of the right of freedom of assembly. So perhaps I need to actually look more in depth for this. And then if you have ideas of information, please send it to me. They're very relevant. Regarding the Netherlands and the other comments and mentions on the specifics of the right of protest around the solidarity movement, with Gaza and the Palestinians, I've been studying, receiving some information from the Netherlands. I've met with a student. I'm going to meet with the other students, and the idea is just to collect information to actually figure out a way of sending the worrisome trends that I'm seeing in most of the countries that I mentioned. I've been studying the topic, so for sure all this information is important. Any information that you have, please send it to me, because it's relevant for my work and just for informing also the different recommendations and actions that I will be doing. I didn't know, just to be always very honest, I didn't know about this new position of the new government. So if you have more information about that, please do send it to me, because I think that's important. And then regarding Sudan, and not only Sudan, but all the countries that right now are having a conflict and that right now are having war, for me, those are the more difficult ones. And then I keep having, and those who have been close to me in the past years, that is the constant problem I have with Haiti in my own continent, but also with the others that are suffering wars and internal conflict and occupations and so on right now. Because then one thing is fighting to allow a government to improve their law enforcers' action in a place in which some types of rights at some level are guaranteed, and then a completely different scenario. It's places where not even the life of the general citizens are protected because of the armed conflict of the military ruling or so on. And that, I think that needs a more address, just to be addressed with a more holistic way from the UN system in general, for the international community, for the regional bodies, and then the pressure of the international community, which is where I am, and then just to also to feel that pressure with information and so on. So this is something that I just, it's just too big for actually one single rapporteur to do. So this is something that needs to be addressed with more a holistic way. About the question of how to create networks, that is not for me to actually reply. So perhaps some of the CIVICUS folks can take this question that was posed by Paula. What I think is, what it is important is to figure out a way of creating networks that actually can give information and support for the mandates. It's not only me. I mean, there are several other special rapporteurs that work on many different topics. So this is why it's very important just to understand who is there and what the support could be. And then I just want to close with two final comments. One, I need to be very clear that I am not the UN. I'm not hired by the UN. I'm not very paid by the UN. I am an independent expert, and therefore I have very limited capacity of doing. The people posed a lot of frustration for the system, and it's right. I mean, I am also frustrated by the limited capacity that the system has, especially to resolve some of the more pressing problems that we have now. But then we have a role of collecting, processing, and presenting information, and voice this information to be used by the UN, by government, by civil society, including you, to advance in your own agendas. And this is what makes us important and relevant. But then I cannot provide sanctions for governments. I cannot directly support human rights at risk or give them like funds for going aware. This is something that we can do. I am an only person. I am only me. I am the special rapporteur of the UN, but I don't have the UN. I am not the UN. And then what I can do is just to voice up the human rights violations to government, to council, to the General Assembly, to the general public, to the media. But for that, I need the information, and I need it clearly, and I need it timely. For example, in Kenya, a couple of weeks ago, I was like very eager to actually do a very specific letter to the government to actually claim for the killings on of the protests that happened at the beginning of June, or a couple of weeks. I'm completely lost on time. I'm always lost on time. But the previous protest, and then I have to tell you that I have received zero information, so I couldn't do it. And then some other colleagues actually collected the information, and she is the one who is leading the information. So it's always a double way. I'm receiving a lot of information from other countries, and those are the countries that I'm also paying attention, because then I know I have the sense that I have more clarity in their realities. As I mentioned before, if I see that there is a law on Paraguay regarding the restriction of NGOs, I can go directly to the Paraguayan website of the Congress and download the law. It's in my own language, so I can read it. I can do the analysis. I can consult the organizations that I know them and I've known them for many years. But I can't do this in the other places, especially in places where I don't speak the language, or in places where are further away, and I do need you to come to me with information. Otherwise, I can't do it. And this is just a message for you. If you want me to act, please, 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 always always come with information, with solutions, with recommendations that I always going to see it. I can't do it only just because somebody sent me a chat saying, oh, please help us in, don't know, Colombia. I'm Colombian, so this is why I'm using if I don't receive any more information. So this is something important. But then again, am I an ally? I'm always an ally. I've been ally. I've been in civil society. I know what it is to be there. I know what it is to be frustrated because nobody pay attention to your topic. I know what it is to be to feel sad because then you send a lot of information and nobody replies. But then let us try to do this in a way in which I can react timely on what happens, but also to recognize that there are limitations in the systems, and then I am a one person. And then we need to take that into mind also. I only have 24 hours per day, and then some of those hours I need to sleep. So it's just that from my side.
Thank you very much, Gina. For me, what is important is that you are an ally and you always be an ally. And as an ally also to you, please also have time to sleep. Colleagues, thank you very much for having for taking part in this important dialogue. Special thanks to you, Gina, the UN Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Peaceful Assembly and Association, for committing your time and your energy, your resources to support this important cause. We really appreciate you. I want also to appreciate colleagues you have given us regional updates. We appreciate you, colleagues. You joined us from different networks convened by CIVICUS, AGNA, Vuka, Global Resource, We Rise Campaign, Digital Democracy Initiative, different networks, all our members and partners. We appreciate you. And I also want to appreciate the team at CIVICUS, and particularly Shupi from Vuka, the Vuka coordinator, for helping us in coordinating this important dialogue. We really appreciate you. And our translators, thank you very much for supporting us to make sure that we make this process a progressive one. So everyone is appreciated, and much thanks to my co-facilitator, Kuhu. We did a good job, and everyone's take care of yourselves, and you will receive our thank you note and the small survey so that we can solicit more information from you. Otherwise, this is it from us, CIVICUS and Vuka. Stay blessed and have a good time, a good day, or a good evening, wherever you are. Bye.